Hello, friends. Welcome to the Veterinary Life Coach Podcast. Today, I have a wonderful and interesting guest for you. Her name is Tigrilla Gardenia. She is a nature-inspired mentor and a certified life coach. She empowers multi-passionate alternative thinkers to harness their brilliance and overcome self-doubt through deep collaboration with the plant world, which is super cool. She helps creative, often neurodivergent individuals overcome overwhelm, compassion fatigue, and imposter syndrome by using plant intelligence and ecosystem thinking as a framework for sustainable emotional and mental wellness. Combining over 25 years of experience in the arts, technology, communication, and eco-social innovation, Tigrilla merges plant neurobiology, ecosystem thinking, community dynamics, and esoteric teachings to help evolve limiting beliefs, unify passions, and help people thrive alongside plant collaborators. She's also the host of the ReConnect with Plant Wisdom podcast, and I'm delighted to have you here today. Welcome to the podcast, Tigrilla. I'm so happy to have you.
Yeah, thank you. Super, super excited about this conversation.
Yeah, when you told me what you do, I was like, oh, this is really fascinating. So I'm super excited because you've got the life coaching piece and then this plant stuff that I know nothing about. So I'm super excited to learn about it. So the question I always ask all my guests is to please tell me their story because I like to see where people started out and how they got to where they are today.
Yeah, so I have one of those weird winding stories. I'll try not to make it too long
Well, you
because
can make it as long as you want. We have time.
so I live, let's kind of start from the present and then we'll jump into the back and then we'll come where
Sounds
it is because
good.
I think it's going to help us. So I live in one of the largest spiritual communities in the world. It's called Damanhur. It's in northern Italy, so that's where I am right now. And this is not at all the place I thought I would be, to be
Okay.
honest. So, as you can tell from my accent, though, I am not native Italian. I am actually Cuban American. I was born and raised in Miami in Florida.
Oh, cool.
And I, when I, you know, I studied music engineering and electrical engineering, but I've always had a passion for a wide range of different things. I mean, I've been an actor, a dancer, event producer. I worked in tech and all these different aspects. So I
Fun.
ended up spending 11 years in Seattle working in high tech, places like Microsoft. And then eventually I left that and I started my own production company. And I used to produce these really cool dance events, these ability for you to immerse yourself and really experience the world through a whole different lens. Ended up co-owning a circus and then left on tour with
Oh
Cirque
my
du
gosh.
Soleil. Yeah, so
That's a
like I said,
crazy story.
I have a really
Yeah,
weird background.
that's
So
awesome.
fast forward through a whole series of things. I am an esoteric teacher. I used to teach Kabbalah and sacred geometry, and today I teach many other subjects that are related. And on top of that, I have this, tech experience and this business experience. And I also have founded multiple companies, produced these big events. And so I'm like happily in Europe, teaching and going back and doing events in the US and exploring things when a girlfriend of mine asks me to come to Italy with her to visit this place called Damanhur. And I come here and we had a weekend. I had some connections that helped us organize our trip. And Damanhur is like Hogwarts for adults. It's this place
A lot of people
where
would like that.
yeah, it's amazing. It's a place where we have like underground temples and it's what happens when you merge your spiritual esoteric life with a very strong mission and into everyday existence and you create a whole new city and culture from it. So it's this type of place that kind of let's just say that if you were meant to be here, like you start getting goosebumps and your body calls you and synchronicity starts moving things so that when I went back to Barcelona, happily, because that's where I was living, happily thinking I was going to stay in Barcelona, everything's conspired to get me here. And it
Wow.
was just really interesting because it was completely unexpected. And yet it was kind of the way life had been for me, like this understanding that I was supposed to follow a path that was built on not necessarily intellectual thinking, even though I am a deep thinker. I love like, deep discussions and getting into things is really something I really enjoy. But the thing that was interesting was like there was something more that was calling me here. And I've been here now almost 15 years, so I kept thinking I was going to leave. Now, every day I wake up and I'm like, do I want to be here? Yes, I want to be here. So here I am.
Now,
And
is
the
it
thing,
like a city or is it like a compound or what? I'm picturing
yeah.
like this commune kind of thing. Like,
Yeah,
what
that's
is
what
it?
most people think.
Yeah.
So it's not. And that's the thing that's even more interesting. So I live in what we call the first city. And we call it the first city because the truth of the matter is that now we have Damanhurians all over the world. We have like ritual circles in the United States and in Norway and in Japan and in Australia. And this is the first city where the temples of humankind are and where the main things are. And we're spread out like a city. So we're in the countryside. We're about an hour outside of, a little bit under an hour outside of Turin and about an hour and a half outside of Milan. And we're nestled into the Alps, into the kind of foothills of the Alps. And we're just a bunch of like little towns where we have these houses, our shared homes that we call nucleos, where we live. And they could be anywhere from like 8 all the way up to like 30 people. And they're just spread out. So you could have a house that like one of our nucleos, beautiful land with animal husbandry, with, gardens. And then you could have next door some person who's, not connected at all. So we're really this sort of detached city. And it's really fascinating because it means that we're very integrated into the location in which we live. We have concentrations in certain towns because, like, for example, the town that I'm in, Vidraco, is where the temples of humankind are, our underground cathedral. So we have a lot of activity here. It's a small town of only about 200 people, and I would say about 100 of them are us, like, between
Okay.
children and everything. But we have a school, we have, a tech center, we have a supermarket, we have things, but also people from the valley and from the area also send their children to our school
Mm,
because it is an alternative way of education. It's a different way of looking at things. And it was
okay.
here in Damanhur as I started to develop, myself, what was I going to do and all my work here that I started working very closely with plants because for us, one of our missions is the reconnection of the different worlds, what we consider to be the animal human world, ourselves, like really just connecting back into who we are, as well as connecting to the world of plants. So the plant world and the world of nature spirits and other types of beings. And so this is where I started to work very, very closely, especially through music, because that's my background. So, music of the plants, which is a device that we developed here that's kind of a musical instrument for plants, became a channel that allowed me to enter into a relationship with plants that was just way beyond the whole, oh, I see you and you're pretty and I want to kind of take care of you and have you at home. But it was more like, a reawakening of understanding, oh my goodness, you're a living being with your own way of sensing. And since I am a big nerd, I jumped into the world of plant neurobiology, biomimicry, plant intelligence, plant consciousness from the scientific perspective. So I have this kind of broad view that allows me to see the connections between the spiritual and esoteric discussions that people have about plants and plant communication and such, the subtle energies involved, but also the physiology and how plants communicate at a physiological level. And what does that really mean when you start to see it from the perspective of, what does it mean when you look at a plant and you say, you are alive? What does it even mean to say you are a plant? And then from there, extrapolate, because I do have this sort of social history and this social innovations perspective, is how do I apply what I'm learning from you, both as a communicator, the more spiritual side, and as models, the more scientific side, how do I apply that to my own ecosystem thinking and the way that I look at my life as a living ecosystem? And how do I create a living ecosystem that's integrated without and recognizes that I, as a human, am nature and that I am an animal and remembers what it means to be an animal and that I evolved from plants. So I do have things that come from plants and the plantness that's inside of me, in addition to my animalness. So it's kind of gives you a broader way of looking so that when I started to coach and when I was doing my coach training, I'm a PCC level at ICF. When I started to do there was this kind of whole world view that came into being because I recognized that the biggest problem that we as humans have, the original trauma, is our disconnection to nature, our
Mm.
disconnection from the fact that we are nature. And how then could I use all of this background to help people, understand themselves at a deeper level through more creative means of like thinking out of the box. In other words, how do I step out of my conditioning by stepping into my plantness, my presence, my rootedness, that the fact that I can't run away from things, right? Because if I'm sessile, I can't run away. I'm rooted into the
Okay.
ground. And then approach things from that look and then come back into my animalness, my instinctual, my movement, my action from that sense of deep peace that comes from I understand my environment. I understand, and I'm taking in lots of sensory input rather than limiting it. And then I can apply it and then use my animalness to instead act on it. So it's like this kind of looking at it from a 360 degrees. Hopefully that made sense.
Yeah, it does. I mean, to those of us that aren't aware of this way of thinking about plants, and when you were talking about spirituality and that kind of thing. Is is it related in any way to like God or, does that come into it at all, or is it more, this is more of a nature spirituality way of looking at things? Like, what is the
The
theory?
spirituality here at Dom and Her. So
Yeah.
Dom and Her believes in a cosmology of the universe, the understanding of how is it that our universe came into being.
Okay.
And we consider divinities in general, all divinities, whether we're talking about whatchamacallit, Zeus, or whether we're talking about Aphrodite, or whether we're talking about Amatsusa. Like there's so many different divinities around the world,
Right.
and we believe that all the divinities are literally fractals, they're fractal elements of an overarching what we call the triad, which is, a primeval divinity that comes into play. So all religions and philosophies are actually really important because each one of them approaches their part of their mission, of the greater mission for the evolution of humanity,
Yeah.
for the reawakening of our divine spark and our understanding of ourselves as a completeness. We just all come from it from slightly different directions. And what it's going to take is all of us connecting back in, not all of us doing the same thing, but all of us recognizing what everybody else is doing so that all the missions click into place. So we have our missions here, which are connected
Right.
to reawakening the relationship between humans and animals. So if you actually go to when we're recording now, if you were to go to the Damanhurian Instagram and Facebook, you'll see the missions that we were just taking out that we were just participating in Africa, where we're working with elephants and gorillas on a subtle level, on a spiritual level, to like reawaken that connection and the memories that both of us have as bridge species. So we have very specific types of missions, like the one of reconnection with the plant world, that are being carried out by us. But there's so many others that are carrying out different parts. So we believe that all of them are part of what we call a triad, which is three main containers that contain all the different kinds of divinities. And these divinities together are what the whole really is. So we're just all parts of a whole.
Okay. So I guess I don't know where you want to start, but my intuition is to start from you explaining the plantness, like reconnecting with plants. What does that mean? Because I
Yeah.
love plants and I'm like really into orchids. During COVID, I got really into orchids and like I love them. And when something happens to them, I feel bad. But I don't know that I have any connectedness. So what does that mean and how does that work and how do you create
Yeah.
that? And like, can you explain all that?
Yeah, that's a great question because I think that the slight difference is that most of us as human beings, feel an affinity to plants. We look at plants, we think the plants are beautiful and such. But there's still also a sense of control. Like you grow here, I'm going to put you where I think you go best. I'm not really going to listen to you. I'm not going to even ask you. I might
Right.
talk to you. Like, there's a lot of people
Yeah,
now that
I
are getting
name mine
into
sometimes, which is kind of weird, but I do have
no,
some of my
and
plants
here's
have names.
exactly. And this is an interesting one. The naming is a great example of there's a difference between I name you because that's the name I want to call you. It's kind of like, permit me for using this example. It might be a bad one in this particular company, but hopefully you'll understand. It's like when I have a dog, like when I adopt an older dog and somebody
Right,
tells me, oh, that dog's name is, Stella. And then
right,
when the dog comes home, I'm like, you're going to be called Rover.
right,
That's not listening to the dog. That's
right.
me imposing my will on you.
Okay.
Because if I was listening, I'd say, Stella, I'd say Rover, I'd listen, I maybe
Okay.
might even call out other names and I'd see what the animal tells me.
See what
What's the
fits.
name right, what fits?
Yeah.
What is it that matches who you are in that frequency? And it's kind of the same thing with animals. I mean, with plants, excuse me. We have a tendency to look at plants as objects that we love and we care for, but only because they do something that we want. So either
Right.
because of the ecosystem services that they give for us, like the oxygen in the air and all these different things, or for the fact that they create beauty for us. Entering
Hmm.
into a relationship plants is looking at plants at 360 degrees. Plants as models, like we've just talked about, like what is it that you do? How is it that you create and work with your environment? What are the relationships that you have? And how do I apply, or how do those relationships change my own relationship? Like a commensalism, right? So one organism is getting a benefit and the other organism is not getting any kind of benefit at all. We tend to think of that as bad in human terms. We tend to think of that as something I don't want. But in a
Right.
natural world, whether we're talking about animals or plants, that's actually quite useful sometimes. It could be something long term that at the overall ecosystem level can be useful, or a parasite, right? I don't know, you have different plants like a mistletoe, who is an actual parasite that lives on a tree and is sitting on that tree and is actually sucking from that tree, different from an orchid who's more of a commensalism, right? I don't really do anything to you. I'm just getting the benefit of being able to hang out here, but my other tree isn't. These are long-term relationships that at an ecosystem level is actually really useful for the overall ecosystem. Keeps the amount of trees in check, makes sure they don't get too big, they don't overrun the area, and all these types of things. So one aspect of creating a relationship with a plant is understanding how a plant does something and why they're doing that, and then looking at what does that mean. And if I'm a being of nature too, and I want to be part of this natural world, then how do I like where have I been conditioned to believe something differently from the way that you do something? And what does that mean? Is it supposed to be that way? Is it not supposed to be that way? Something really simple that I've been talking about a lot lately is that we as humans know of our five senses, right? You know, we see, we touch, all these things. But plants have at least 15 other senses. Well, what if really, because we evolved from plants, we actually have those same those same 15 senses somewhere? They're just atrophied. We don't use them. So if I enter into a relationship with this plant, I see the plant fully. I give myself an opportunity to expand my perception, even just using my same five senses. And then I work with the plant to say, okay, help me recognize even just one other sense, right? Any sense, like help me understand better a geomagnetic, sense, or light, like any kind of tropism that might help me better navigate a world in which I live by helping me reconnect to parts of myself that I might not know. So there's working with plants as mentors, which is kind of like what I was just mentioning, as models, like, oh, you do this thing. This is what commensalisms look like. Why is it that I'm thinking that that's negative when in the natural world commensalisms exist? And are there any parameters? Competition in the natural world, as you know, exists. It's part of it, but it's not constant. It can't be constant, because if it's constant, one is going to die because that's
Right.
usually
Right.
what happens. So you can look at it as mentors, as models, and then the collaboration part adds another element to it, which is, okay, how do I communicate with you? When I walk by, and almost everybody has had this experience, they just don't always give themselves the opportunity to recognize it, is I walk by a tree and I get this sensation of stopping, of taking a deep breath, right? Of this idea that there's these terpenes in the air that are just coming into me, or these volatile organic compounds that a tree is releasing into the air, which is a form of communication between tree and any other organism, whether it's a plant organism or an animal. I'm an animal, which means you're probably trying to communicate with me. So, how do I learn how to interpret what these, even physiological, and then you can also move on to the spiritual and the subtle, but even let's just start with the physiological, all the different ways plants communicate right now, I should have sensors for, because I'm an animal too, right?
Right.
So, what happens when I start to bring these sensors, those senses that I was talking about in these sensors online? How do I attune my antenna? What does it change? And how do I better then navigate the world? Because I understand my environment better. So I'm not scared. I'm much more calm. I know where to go when I need things. So it really can enhance the way you approach the world and allow you to become in tune rather than out of harmony, which is what many of us are right now.
Right. And is the out of harmony where all of the imposter syndrome and,
Absolutely.
because you said you work with people on compassion fatigue and imposter syndrome and overwhelm and all of that. So that those conditions, I hate to call it that, but those things that we experience come from us being out of balance with plants and animals and the world. Is
Absolutely.
that kind of your
Yeah, and also the recognition, a lot of it comes from the fact that we forget that in an ecosystem, everything has its place and its function. In other
right,
words, there is no garbage can in in an ecosystem that somebody
right,
picks it up and takes it away, right? Something that I produce, even if it feels like in an ecosystem, even something that is my waste gets used by somebody else. So if I place it into the right place in the location, if I go and I excrete, or when I die, if I move into this, another organism can come in and use it. So if I use that same mentality to think every part of me, whether it's something that I think is destructive or hurtful or something, actually has its place in the ecosystem of my life. Because if it's a thought that comes into me, then it must have a place somewhere. And so if I learn how to take all my characteristics and think of them as an ecosystem, it's not so much about, oh, I need to get rid of my imposter syndrome. It's where is my imposter syndrome actually useful? I'll give you an example that we was just talking about the other day. I was talking to a good friend of mine. She also works, she's a trainer and she works for a big company here in Italy that does training all around Italy. And we were talking about another friend of ours who just recently came into the coaching world and who is really at the very, very, very beginning. And she's presenting herself in a way that can be kind of confusing because, she's at the beginning, she's still learning her footing, trying to
right,
understand everything. That's a place where imposter syndrome would actually be useful, because imposter syndrome in that scenario where she is would make her pause. And if she looked at it and said, why am I feeling this? She could evaluate where she is and then say, oh, okay, I see it. This is the things that I have to change. So if you look at all of things like imposter syndromes and limiting beliefs in general, whether it's money, whether it's, my way of being, and I look at it more as a bodyguard that I put in place in my ecosystem to protect me from something, but I forgot about the bodyguard and I forgot what I
right.
needed to be protected from,
Okay.
then I could, slip up to that, come up to that bodyguard and be like, hey, imposter syndrome, I put you in here for something. Why did I put you in here? Like, can you help me see the scenarios in which you're actually useful to my ecosystem? And if they say, okay, in this particular case, you put me here because you were just learning a training and you didn't want to like boast about something, then be asked a question that you couldn't answer and whatever, but then you forgot about me and you left me here. And so now that you've finished the certification, have 2 more years of experience and have all this stuff, you're still thinking about like that first month when you put me here to begin with. And so then you can say, oh, my ecosystem has actually changed. Like I'm actually able. So you're not useful anymore in that scenario. Let me move you out of the way. Like, thanks so much. Thank you for helping me, but not necessary anymore.
Yeah, so you're thinking it more of part of your tools that you have and not something that you're trying to cure.
Correct.
I think
Correct.
a lot of times we think, oh, we have to fix our compassion fatigue. We have to fix our overwhelm. We have to fix our
Hmm.
imposter syndrome. And what you're
Yeah,
saying is that no, we don't. We just have to understand where it came from and why it's useful and where we need to place it when we're
exactly.
not using it or when we don't need it anymore, that kind of thing.
Exactly. Yeah,
Okay.
and that's exactly how I work with my clients. So I work on more the idea of befriending your limiting beliefs, on making friendship with them and mastering all those characteristics. So speaking about myself, I spent a very long time of my life thinking I had to change, transform, get rid of the fact that I am a very critical person. And that criticality, like that fact that I'm so critical about things, I look at the small, minute details of course, can make me be very judgmental,
Right.
especially when I'm coming from a place of fear.
Right.
If I'm afraid of something, I'm going to like judge it. Or if I'm thinking in a very moralistic, or, I'm putting it as my value system is more important than everybody else's because I don't understand, or things like that. So when I went into and I realized that that is my dominant personality, and I stopped thinking, wait a minute, because this was something that happened to me in the Sacred Woods Forest here, where I was sitting in the Sacred Woods Forest and I was looking around, and it was like I was, entering into this relationship with the plants. And all of a sudden I started to see kind of all these little ecosystem services and the way the ecosystem was working and understanding, and kind of the idea of, wait a minute, your critic, which is not an inner critic, it's an outer critic, unfortunately. That critic is really good at seeing the problems in like a proposal or an understanding where something is going to go wrong, or seeing even the elements that are going to make it right. In other words, that criticalness, when it's not coming, when it's not, it doesn't need to be blocked all the time. You
Right.
just need to make sure, you need to find out what it's coming from, and you need to master the use of it, which meant for me, for example, mastering my words, my way of speaking about it, like just to make sure that I could get the point across in a way that didn't destroy everything else. And yet being comfortable with destroying the things that needed to be destroyed, right? Which is something
Okay.
we tend to think, oh, that's destructive. Yeah,
Right.
and destructive is good
It's
when
sometimes
used
good. Yeah.
correctly. So it
Right.
really is about mastering your talent and looking at it not as this is good and this is bad, because in an ecosystem, again, it's what's useful. What's useful? Like, where is it useful? When is it useful? And how much of it is useful? Because I could be slightly critical and look at something and like be like, oh, I just need to nudge this. And the people will see the rest of the flaws. Or I might have a different situation where, no, 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 I need to get into all of the flaws because these people or this group or this organization is not going to see it. So today, instead, as a matter of fact, just yesterday, I got a message from there's a team here that distills our characteristics and puts them into this crystal that's connected to all of the Damanhurians around the world. So it's kind of like a way of distilling all of our talents. And the talents was a critical thinker who can come in and see like all the details. Like it was
Oh,
literally in the
so
crystal.
now
And I was like,
instead of being a fault, it's a advantage.
exactly,
Right.
because I've learned how to use it, and I've learned also when not to use it. Like, okay, I do see the flaw, but there's no benefit in me working and pointing that flaw out right now. It's not worth it. And so being able to master to not look at that talent or that limiting belief as something negative, but instead getting into a relationship with it. When should it be commensalism? When should it be competition? When should it be instead parasitism? When should it be predation? Like looking at it from that ecosystem view of when is this useful to the overall ecosystem of my life that I'm trying to create.
I love that. So we talked a little bit before we got on this podcast about how you reached out to me because you like the animal connection and that a lot of what you do also involves the animal part of us with the plant part of us. Can you kind of explain that a little bit to you touched on it a little bit, but
Yeah.
tell me why you were fascinated with veterinarians and what we do and what's the connection there and how can we think of it differently?
Yeah, I was really interested in having this discussion with you because I think sometimes, and right now there's even like a raging somewhat, okay, it's yeah, it is a raging war that's happening right now between, for example, animal rights and plant rights, where you would think would be aligned, but we're actually not. Many people in the plants right movement are not very happy with the animal rights movements, some because they don't recognize plants in that same way, and others because they fear that it's going to take away from all the work that's being done for us to recognize animals. When in reality, the more you work with plants, the more you recognize that all beings of nature have their place. Again, going back to that whole ecosystem, and they all have an importance that are different. Our physiologies are different, right?
Right,
We can't look at a plant and say, you should never be killed. Like that we would never eat, type
right,
of
right,
thing.
exactly.
And then it opens you to rethink how it is that you interact with the animal world, both as myself, because I am an animal, right? So right now, my disconnection to my own body, to the way I think, to my physical body, to my somatic response, my ability to take in all that input, is because I'm also disconnected from my animal self. And my animal self has a series of characteristics: action, movement, being able to do all these types of things. But I also evolved from plant, right? There is an evolution that happens in here. So we do have these connections. And I'm always curious. I have found myself as a person who has become over the years much more, I don't want to say compassionate, but like I feel more connected to animals, even though I focus on plants, because helping me recognize my own natureness means that my relationship with animals have completely changed as well.
Right.
And I think that it's an interesting conversation of we tend to lean towards one or the other when in reality there is no separation, right? You don't look outside, like I'm looking outside my window and I see quote unquote nature with a capital N, but there's no yes, sure, if I sat there I could distinguish, oh, that's a silver fir. Hi, Gary. That's, the river. That's this. Those are the swallows. But in reality, the whole thing is nature.
It's
And
nature, yeah.
that's me too in that.
Including
Yeah.
us. Yeah.
And so it really just shifts the way that we see the world, and it shifts also our relationships, and it shifts also our relationship to food. It shifts our relationship to clothing and to objects that we think about, because they all come from us. Like they all come from some being of nature gave their life in order for
Right.
you to have something.
Okay. I like that. So, how can, I don't know if this is a good question, but how can we as veterinarians or veterinary people that work in this field with animals and humans and probably plants as well, how can we start to see that relationship in your perspective to help us, you know, think about things differently?
Yeah.
Does that make
So,
sense?
yeah, it does. It's, so I often tell people that an easy way is, and kind of like I think I had said it before, that sometimes it's nice to step out of my animalness and into my plantness to a certain extent in
Okay.
order to shift the perspective, because plants are so different, right? Sometimes in working with animals, we tend to also treat them like humans, right? We anthropomorphize very much the way they are. And in some ways, some animals have evolved to kind of connect with us in those ways. But even if you think about language, right? Right now, how many people are experimenting with having, dogs and cats that press the buttons to be able to use human
Right.
language? But
Yeah.
yet we've been living alongside plants, I mean, animals for years. And how much of us really sit there and try to understand, the differences in their barking? Like if you listen to, prairie dogs, their barking is very distinct. It means things. It tells you
Right.
danger. It tells you which direction. It's actually a democracy. In other words, there's a sort of, if I remember correctly, it's a sneezing that happens when they want to message each other of like their voting process. And
Mm.
it's who does it the most. It's really interesting.
Yeah, that is
But we
interesting.
don't do this with our animals. We try to get them to be more human, and we
Right.
try to treat them as humans. So sometimes stepping out of that relationship and reconnecting with a being that is so different, because there's no eyes, there's no, yet they can see us, there's
Right.
no hands, and yet they can touch, like all of these different pieces. Then when we come back into like our animal relationships, now all of a sudden it's like, oh, wait a minute, how would you do that? How are you interpreting your environment? How is it that, what is it that makes you happy and that gives you happiness and health and all the different things that we want? And a lot of it, the way to enter into that relationship with plants is actually just spending time with them. We could sit on the couch and like stroke a dog or a cat or have a cat on your lap and just sit. And every once in a while, you'll stop whatever else you're doing and you'll just be in that purr or that relationship of sorts. I used to do it with a snake. I used to have a snake and I always do that all
Oh,
the
cool.
time. Like just sit there
Just
curled up
cuddle
and
and
really enter into that reptile breathing rhythm and all those things. It's the same thing with a plant. Like I can't tell you how many times I sit, especially with this one right here, who doesn't like to talk, but instead is more somatic. I'll just sit there and, look at the leaves, be in that presence, touch, but with different parts of your body also. Just looking at trying to enter into the fact that our dominant sense, which is vision, is not the dominant sense of every species. So, how do I enter into the way you are? Which
Hmm.
again then helps me re-understand that, maybe I need to develop my sense of smell better so that I can connect with my dog more, rather than trying to have my dog talk to me through their bark or
Right.
through, pushing buttons. So
Huh.
just spending a few minutes, 2 minutes a day, sitting with even just a houseplant or sitting outside with a tree and using your senses, sense of smell, the sense of, taste, to approach this different being with this openness of like, open my senses so that I can perceive you better, I guarantee will change the way that you deal with any domestic animal, any domestic animal.
That's so fascinating. So, do you do you feel that it's okay to try to have this relationship or learn from any plant? Like, can it be house plant? Can it be plants outside? Like, it doesn't really matter.
It doesn't
You
really
just pick
matter. It's
one.
different things.
Okay.
It's it's so, for example, a tree that has been growing up in a city, right? A city tree that's in the city park is going to have a series of experiences. Still tree,
Right.
but also conditioned and trained with a series of experiences that I have because lots and lots of people, lots of animals, domestic animals mainly, different than if I go out to the bush, or go out to the
Right.
middle of a
Middle of the
forest.
woods. Right.
And in the middle of the woods, I have a completely different type. My houseplants, many of which, can you imagine if we really entered into what it means to adapt, especially right now with everything like climate change and the anxiety that's happening around the world? Plants, especially our house plants, are usually tropical plants that got brought into the house and into the home and into all kinds of different environments. They've had to adapt probably more than anyone else,
Right.
adapt to different species around them, to different watering schedules, to soil conditions, to their networks and connections. I just had a parasol mushroom pop up from my business partner Noel, which is a Christmas cactus. And I was like, where the hell did this come from? Like,
Yeah.
how did you form a relationship with a mushroom
Right.
inside of my home? But that's the adaption, like all of those qualities, which honestly, we're pretty bad at. Like, we're not
Yeah.
flexible. We don't adapt easily. We're not open to change. And so, just entering into that relationship, imagine all you can learn about when it's appropriate for you to adapt to the location or to the experience, to the environment that you're in, and when instead you should push back and show me, no, 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 I want more water. So you might want to water me once a month. You're going to water me every single week because that's what I need. And if not, I'm just going to die and I'm going to get out of here because this
Right.
is not my
I'm gonna drop
environment.
my leaves all over your house and you'll know
Exactly.
something's wrong with me.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
that's it. Like, these are many of the little things that we can learn by entering into this relationship. Adaption, like, how do I adapt? That type of flexibility, decision making. Plants make an enormous amount of decisions on a regular basis. It's fascinating. They have to decide. I don't know when my next drink is going to come. I don't know when the sunlight is going to come again. I don't know if you're going to move me into a condition that doesn't work. I need to think very critically about how I use my resources. And that's another thing that we can learn. How do I best use my resources so that I can actually flourish and bloom and create the right environment for me? And what does it mean when I'm not blooming? How do I use and interpret that? How do I analyze what's my environment around me to recognize more easily what is it that's causing me not to bloom, which means I'm surviving, but I'm not
Right.
really
Not
thriving.
thriving. Yeah. I love that. So what have I not asked? What do we need to touch on before we wrap this up? There's so much. I mean, like I have
There's
so many
so
questions,
much.
but what I guess give me like one or two things that you think that we really should know as veterinarians, as people that own businesses, as people that work with the public, with animals, to try to start to see things differently so we can coach
You,
ourselves, I guess.
Yeah, I guess I would say, let's see. One thing that's important is that working with a plant, again, because a plant is a completely different organism with very, like it's yeah, we try to anthropomorphize plants because we try to anthropomorphize everything. But if
Right.
you step out of it for a second, it really does expand your ability to sense the world. And so this is a great piece that helps us in all of it, like whether we're talking about business or whether we're talking about personal relationships. Because when I become more attuned to sensing into the environment, then I can make decisions that come not from my conditioning and how I was trained to do things, but come from more of, again, that relationship that I'm building. And they're not always based on the way things have always been done. It makes it much easier for us to experiment and to even fail, to be honest, because when we think about a plant, for example, if I have a plant that's always put out pink flowers, for example, and one day that plant starts putting out red flowers, I don't actually think there's something wrong with the plant. I
Right.
approach the plant with curiosity. I approach the plant with, oh my goodness, how are you doing this? What
Oh,
has
yeah.
changed in your environment and such? So if I was to apply that same model to myself, when I do something out of the ordinary, or when I start to change some part of myself, or somebody around me will like all of a sudden put out, a red flower, something completely different. I can also learn to approach with that same level of curiosity of like, okay, if you are a different organism than me, rather than trying to put myself on you and saying, why the hell are you doing that? I can come into it from the perspective of, you're something completely unknown to me. Walk me through it, help me get that. So especially in a coaching type of environment, for example, for me, it's opened me to the idea that everything has its place. So
Right.
therefore, approach it with curiosity and figure it out, which is super important in the neurodivergent world, right? Everything that is around multipassionate and neurodivergent, it's about seeing a picture at a different level in when you do biomimicry, which is how I use it's bio-inspired design. It's looking at how do I design products and services and social innovations that are based on biological processes. And in when we start to do this, we look at something when we're talking about social innovation or social relationships. We look at something called a deep pattern. And a deep pattern is a pattern that that species might exhibit. So, for example, swarming in birds, right? Birds swarm as two beautiful swallows are like having a blast playing outside my window. They maintain a very simple rule, which is the distance between the wings, right? So this distance maintains this entire formation that allows these beings to travel long distances, stay united, keep them safe, all these different aspects. It's it's simple rules. It's one little rule. I heard of a school, an elementary school, that applied this same theory of a simple rule and a deep pattern. So the deep pattern was care. That was what they wanted to express. And what they said was they had three simple rules. Rule number one, take care of yourself, which means if you feel sick, if somebody's hurting you, you should feel comfortable to say something about it because your number one rule in this school is to take care of yourself. Rule number two, take care of others. Means there's no bullying or anything because the kids had all the permission to take care of others, to inform when they saw things that were not good or anything
Right.
that they thought was getting hurt in any which way. They stumbled and they didn't say anything about it or whatever. And number three, take care of your school. So you have permission
The
to
environment.
not only do you take care of it, take my shoes off when it's not appropriate, clean up after myself, but also if I see somebody who's writing on the walls, say something because one, I take care of me, two, I take care of others, and three, I take care of my school.
Yeah. Well, and
Simple.
those three rules, if you just applied them to anything in your life, to your family, to your veterinary hospital, those three simple rules would change a lot of things, I think.
It would also because it means that when I do something like I go to a teacher and I say, or I go to my family member and I say something, it's if it's coming from one of those three rules, sure, I might not like it, but I'm not mad at you
Right.
Because even if you're wrong, I could just say, "Oh no, you interpreted that wrong. I wasn't self-hurting or whatever. I was doing this, or that person didn't hurt me. You just didn't see it right." But I don't
Right.
get mad at the person because I know that the person's operating from one
Following
of
the
those
rules.
three.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
That's
these
awesome.
are a lot of the different lessons that as we go deeper into the way that the natural world builds things, the way plants create an ecosystem, we start to see these patterns emerge. And we start to recognize how the heck did we get so separated from them ourselves?
Right. Right.
What
Yeah.
happened to us?
It is super fascinating. I
Mm.
never really thought of it. Briefly, can you tell me what plant music is?
Yeah.
When you said that, I was like, what the heck is that?
So Dominer has, so I told you that one of our missions is this reconnection with the plant world. So
Yeah.
early on in around the late 1970s, we were thinking about this and, looking at different ways where we can interact and work with plants. And one of the things that came out was this idea that we had a bunch of people who like to tinker with electronics. And so they ended up creating a device. So plants have an electrical system kind of like ours. They don't have,
Right.
there's arguments on whether or not they have neuron-like functions. We're not going to get
Right.
into that argument
Right.
since
Like there's
you as
something
vet.
electromagnetic happening.
Exactly. We know that for sure. There are
Right.
some that call that the root tips have a series of axioms that act like neurons, blah, blah, blah. Not going to get into the debate. But anyways, they do still have an electrical system that's very actually, their electrophysiology is actually very sophisticated. So we created a device that measures the electrical impedance from the leaf through to the soil with the idea of just listening in to what was going on and seeing what we
Yeah.
can interpret from that. But what happened was that as we started working with this and eventually turned that those electrical responses, those frequencies into notes of music using MIDI, we started to notice that as people were interacting with the plants, so humans and plants interacting together, the plant would start to change the music. And the
Oh,
music became very deliberate. So like the plant could hear, back then we didn't know that plants were hearing because it's only been in the last maybe 15 years that research has come out about the fact that plants can actually hear, biologically speaking.
right.
But back then, we would just notice that, musicians maybe started to play along with this music, and then the plant would vary the music and would play along with the human. And so this device over the years, starting from that like 1970s experimentation to today, has really evolved into a small device called the Music of the Plants. And it's a small device that you plug in a plant and it allows the plant to use their electrophysiology in order to create musical notes and melodies and such.
That's so cool.
It's super cool. It really does change. And we've experimented with a lot of different things here in Damanhur, and there's experimentation now that it's available widely in the world. There's a lot more experimentation of also the effects. Like I have a group in that studies the effects of plant music on human health, which is another fascinating area because we do know that plants in general affect our health, right? When you
Right.
live near denser areas of plants, you have like lower levels of depression, more altruism, more generosity. If we're immersed in an environment, in a natural environment, our cortisol levels drop to about 50% in about 20 minutes. So there is a physiological response to this. And we also know music therapy has a whole series also of
Right.
healing effects and such. So
Yeah.
imagine when you combine these two together,
Yeah. That's
you
so
have
cool.
the fact that you're interacting very closely with a plant, which, lowers our anxiety. It ups our healing in general. I mean, from the 1970s, it's been studied the idea that if I have a view to a tree or a plant of some sort and I'm in the ICU, I will actually recover from operations faster. There's a beautiful study done, even just starting in the 1970s. So this is stuff that we kind of know, and now we're starting to put together, and we're trying to understand how is it that the plants use this music by creating these notes of music. Is it the melody that they're creating? Although there is some evidence that the specific melody itself triggers responses in the physical body, blood changes, and so there's blood platelet level changes, coagulation levels change, like all kinds of different things. But we're also seeing other kinds of responses as well. There's been some small studies, like there's more now PhDs and that are starting to get into this idea of like cardiology and coma patients and healing in general, like physical therapy. And so it's another, besides the just general soothing that we hear across the board. So a great thing to have in your waiting room when you have all these
Yeah,
dogs and cats that are
right.
like, ah,
Yeah, yeah, and we're always struggling to keep plants alive
yes.
in that environment, but yeah,
Yeah.
it would be beneficial. So this is really, yeah, this has been super fun to listen to you. So tell people where they can find out more about this, more about you, if they're interested, and if people are interested and they want, you to come back on the podcast and tell us more, if you're willing,
I'm
I'd
totally
love to
willing.
have you because I have lots more questions, but kind of tell them where they can find you and learn more about this. And
Yeah, so I'm luckily very easy because my everything is under my name. So Tigrilla
yeah, you have an
Gardenia.
awesome name too. Tell
Thank
us
you.
where that name came from. That's another
So
question.
in Dom and Her, as part of our spiritual path, you have the ability, if you want, to go and conquer a new name. And it happens in stages. First name is an animal or nature spirit. So a tigrila is a small South American
Yeah,
feline,
love that.
looks like an ocelot, but just much smaller, lives up in the
Okay.
trees in the area of like Colombia and such. Endangered, unfortunately, but wonderful organizations that are taking very good care of me because I'm very small. So I look like a cat. Only
Okay.
that it's not a cat. And once you have the cat in the house, you'll realize I'm not a cat.
Okay.
So, but
It's
super beautiful
fiercer
with
than
like
that.
big eyes.
Yeah.
And then the gardenia is the second name because it's a plant or a fungi. And so obviously the beautiful white gardenia. We have
Yeah.
other names, but those you'll
I
discover
love that.
if you
That's
come. Those are the
awesome.
two. So
So
my
they look up that
website,
name. Yeah.
yeah. So my website is tigrillagardenia.com. And that's where, of course, you can find me. I also am the founder of the Naturally Conscious Community, which is an online space dedicated to human plant relations. And it's a place where we have, creativity group and a book club and masterclass discussion levels. And I have courses and just a free area as well, where the idea is how do we really explore this new world that we're trying to build, this paradigm that we're trying to shift of co-creation with the natural world, of recognition of kin for who they are, not for some mirroring of humanness into it, but instead, how do we understand plantness in a new way? So it's just an experimental area and an area with lots of different spaces. It's kind of like a dedicated Facebook, only,
So as you
only
get
us in
into
there.
that, you'll certainly learn more about
Yeah,
this whole world.
exactly.
I love
And
it.
then, of course, I'm on all the social media with just at Tigrilla Gardenia. So my podcast, Reconnect with Plant
I
Wisdom,
love how you say
yeah. Thank you.
it. It's that
And
Italian. I always do this when I'm trying to speak Italian and it
everybody,
doesn't work.
exactly.
It doesn't work for me. I love it. Well,
And so,
this has
yeah, so
been
I'm easy to
super
find.
fun. Yeah, it's been super fun. And if anybody out there is really interested in this, go check out Tigrilla's website and all of that and get some more information. And if you want to see her back, email me or some comments, and maybe she and I can get back together and talk about this some more because it's been super fun.
I'd love it. I'd love it. I look forward to it. Thank you so much for having
All
me.
right. Well,
I was a little hesitant when I reached out. I was like, oh, animals. Is she gonna get it? But yes, you did.
I do get it. I do get it. Well, I love plants too. I don't understand all of this that you're talking about, but I love to learn about things that are different. And I think this is really a fascinating subject. And I had no idea that this was a thing. When I read your stuff, I was like, wow, this is cool. So it's been really fun
Fantastic.
having you. And I'm sure there's many more things we could talk about. So maybe we'll get back together sometime and do this again.
I look forward to it.
All
Thank
right.
you.
So everybody reach out and have a beautiful week. Bye.